you're an advisor to Herod the Great, and he tells you that he is going to, first of all, adopt your advice to protect his eastern frontier. And he's going to erect a line of fortresses along the eastern side of his empire, or his kingdom. Most of these will be on the spots of earlier Hasmonean fortresses. There were already places such as that, including Masada, which was the venue that he stashed his family when he hightailed it to Rome in the year 40, after having that brief battle outside of Jerusalem. So most of these are older sites that he enlarges but maintains the essential quality of them as fortresses. Masada and Kypros and Alexandrium, and he adds a couple more to the list. Machaerus over here on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and also he builds a sort of fortress at Herodium, just outside of Jerusalem. The second thing that Herod tells you he's going to do is build cities. He's going to build cities. To which your response is, of course, the immediate response that you're going to have to him is, what a good idea. That's a great idea. And as he fixes you with his steely gaze and waits for you to, in your sycophantic way, continue to tell him what a good idea this was and why, what are you going to say? Why is it such a good idea to expend resources on building cities? Well, there are already cities here, of course. I mean, there are already large agglomerations of people. You know, throughout the Hellenistic period, there are cities along the coast. There are cities now in the interior. It's not as if nobody, it's not as if this is a rural, wholly poor and dispersed countryside. And it's been part of successive empires. And, I mean, you can recall the large cities on the coast from the Hellenistic period. So while it's true that it's kind of handy to have some people accumulate in one place, although it's also dangerous because then, if it's a fortified city, some tyrant can come along and declare it their own and break away. So it can't really just be, for population management, because if that was the only reason, he doesn't need to establish new cities. In what way?
Saying that I have all this money, these resources, that I can build cities, as many cities as I want, wherever I want.
Who is the person par excellence who follows that reasoning? Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great establishes more cities than anybody ever has. Establishing cities is something that people in charge do, like having palaces. It's a way to show that you can. So you say, "Oh, that's great, sir." Just like Alexander. Why, yes, that's fantastic. And then Herod again fixes you with that look and says, "Well, where do you think I should put these cities?" I'm going to build 2 cities, he says, 2 new cities. What should they be and why? You want a minute to chat? 2 new cities. What should they be and why? All right, he says, I'm going to build 2 cities. Where should I build the first one? Oh, what do you know? Build one along the coast and make your own little port city. Why? Why should I do that? Commerce and international trade. That seems like, I just want to say, that sounds to us like a very logical reason, and I'll come back to that point in a few minutes. But I ask you, of all of the personality aspects, events of Herod's life, things that impinged upon his thinking, balls he's needing to keep in the air, is commercial expansion one of them? No, it really isn't. So, I mean, that seems like that's something that immediately springs to our minds. And it's always really important when you're thinking about anything from a different culture, but especially a different time and culture, to wonder to yourself if this is just our issue. If that's just not a mite anachronistic. Any aspect that seems logical to us, not necessarily always logical. So one thing that you might think about is that whole range of events that formed Herod. And then it's not impossible that would come to his mind. But anyway, we haven't seen any evidence that might be something important to him. You had your hand up again. You're going to change your mind. Oh. You're going to change your mind. Okay. He wants to know what you think. Where should he put the cities? The northern and the southern borders. Because? And Herod says to you, you know what? I'm not talking about fortresses. I'm talking about cities. I need people to want to live there. If the idea is to be like Alexander, what is the city par excellence? It's Alexandria in Egypt, the greatest city in the East, one of the greatest cities the world has ever known. It's not built out of fear. It's built out of power. I don't need to protect the north, and I don't need to. Who's on the north? The Romans. This is Roman Syria. Who's on the south? Nobody. The Nabateans. Haven't I just defeated them twice? Well, you guys, you're gonna be in trouble with him. Well, there is an enormous city. It's Jerusalem. What are you telling me to do? Take everybody out of Jerusalem? I already have enough trouble with these people. They don't trust me. I was born in Idumea. They don't even think I'm a real Jew. How am I supposed to make a city in a place where there's only one logical place to have a city, and that's been there for the last 1,000 years? I just managed to defeat, after 3 hard years of battle, the actual blood legitimate ruler of these folks. This is my power base. I'm not going to get another one. I can't afford to alienate these people. What are you talking about? I'm about to fire the lot of you. What do you say? East of the Jordan River. This is a city east of the Jordan River that the Ptolemies had refounded, Ptolemy II. This is actually modern-day Amman. So that was a good choice for a city that Ptolemy II made. So there is a city there. There's a big city there. And that is an even less inviting land for urbanization than this one. It's even drier. there's less water, there's more desert. So there's just only so much carrying capacity certain regions can support.
Perhaps somewhere in the Galilee, because it's far enough away from Jerusalem that won't stop on its urbanization goes, and they're pretty safe. The buildings are right there. They're not worried about strong fortification. Like just focus on the city.
I want to make a city that's going to make a difference. Galilee is nowhere. A bunch of little hills, a bunch of little farmsteads, scattered villages. Nothing's happened here since the Assyrians came through. There has not been a city in this region for hundreds of years. You know why? These folks are Hicks. I don't know. I was in charge here for a while. I left as soon as I could. This will show nobody anything. I make a city here, and people will be like, boy, what were Antony and Octavian thinking when they put this guy in charge? This guy's got no vision, no imagination, no pride. Get your hand up.
Oh, I was going to say, the Galilee area, because there was a temple there, it's not already
He's looking to make a point. If you're going to put a city on the ground, a new city, people have to want to live there. Other people are going to want, you want other people to admire it. You want as much bang for your buck as possible. He doesn't pick Galilee. Clearly, he did not think he was going to get very much bang for his buck. Among the things that we know about him was he was a risk taker. Well, this is not his kingdom. This is his kingdom. You're only allowed to put a city in the territory that you've got. You can give money to other cities, and he does. He gives money to the Tyrians to build. He gives money to the people at Ashkelon to build. He gives money to various cities in Greece. So that he does. But you're only allowed to establish a city on territory that you are already the legitimate ruler of. Isn't putting something by Jerusalem pretty risky? What do you mean?
Like politically, and it's a great show of power. Like,
Oh, you mean that would appeal to him? Well, he does build in Jerusalem, but in a more careful way than you're suggesting. And okay, so you're all fired and no more.
You might want to build where you can avoid the clash of the differences of all these people you have new. And impress the outside world, be one thing.
And so where will that be?
But when they say the coast, that's one place the outside world would certainly see.
The coast is one place that the outside world will certainly see. That is true. And this map, again, this map makes it look as if it's all one, possibly big happy family, but we know that's not true. Who's living along the coast? Phoenicians, pagans, other Semites, but also Greeks, Rome, just lots of other folks. There are lots of other cults. There's traders. There's Gentiles. In other words, there's people who aren't Judean. By this time, where have Judeans spread? Where do Judeans live in addition to Judea? What other big region? Galilee. They live in Galilee, and they live in the Golan. They live in Golanitis. This we know from both the political territory that was given to the Hasmoneans, and we know it from the archaeological evidence. I mean, it's pretty clear from the archaeological evidence of Gamla, sadly not on this map, that, that there are Judeans living there by this time. So all of this area is Judean and not real interested in Herod as a legitimate ruler. These people need to be brought into the fold. Now, there are two ways to deal with people who you're in charge of but don't feel that you and they are the same, on the same side. And one's with a carrot and one's with a stick. So partially behind your suggestion is a stick. You know, show him who's boss. But Herod doesn't do that. He's big on the carrot approach. In fact, he's not much on the stick approach at all. He uses his building very tactically, very strategically, to put in areas where there are not Judeans, not Jews, the kinds of comforts and evidences of Roman culture and Roman authority that will impress and inspire. And he keeps those away from areas where the majority of the people are Jews. So he builds two cities. One is, okay, you get to stay around for a little while, and you do too, even though you pulled back. You can't do that with Herod, you know. He's a decisive guy. Is right here on the coast, the former Stratos Tower, Caesarea. And the second, and in fact the first of the cities that he establishes, he looks at you all and he says, where are you from? Do you not know the history of this land? Do you not read the texts that have come down? I am the king of this territory. When is the last time that there was one Jewish presence throughout here? It was the First Temple period. There were two capitals. One was Jerusalem. What was the second? You people don't read your history, but I do. He renames Samaria for the new boss, the new sheriff in town, Octavian, now called Augustus, in Latin, renamed by the Roman Senate. Augustus, in Greek, the official Mediterranean language of this region, is Sebaste. And here, at the ancient Israelite capital, conquered by the Assyrians in the latter part of the 8th century BCE, probably a local power base for governor appointed by the Babylonians through the most of the Persian period. Remember Sanballat? He came from Samaria. So this is a traditional power base. And it's here in this region which is very, very happily not strongly Judean. And yet it's inland. It's a straight shot from Jerusalem, but not within Judea proper, not within the heartland. That is as close as he is going to get to Jerusalem when he establishes a new city. He builds a huge new town. The Israelite citadel had been just along the top of the mound, and it in and of itself was reasonably sizable. 160 acres of summit and terrace. 6,000 new colonists are moved into the town. It is made Roman by a half a mile long colonnaded street. You see it here, looking down from the summit. I'm actually standing about there, looking down when I took this picture. And here along it, nothing says Roman like columns. It's very good. Many, many columns receding along into the distance, into the horizon. And then, right on the top, where had been the Israelite palatial compound, is built a fortified temple villa complex. This is the crowning piece for the city. This is not the city. This is the building complex that's at the top. You have to imagine all around, below, down where those colonnaded streets are, and on the terraces, and then even down further, that's where all the housing is. We don't have any of that, hasn't been excavated. What we have, courtesy of archaeologists from Harvard University at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, and around 1902, they came to Samaria. They came to Samaria looking for, the palace of Ahab and Omri, the Israelite Samaria. And smack in the middle of it, they found this enormous temple that crowns the summit of the site and is plunked right down. There is somebody new in charge here. And it's not Herod. The temple is dedicated to Augustus. The temple is dedicated to a person who is still alive. It's shocking, but it's not shocking. On the one hand, temples are supposed to be to gods. On the other hand, in the East, there is a long, long tradition of the king as a divine intermediary. So the idea that there could be a temple to a living being is not completely ridiculous. But of course, it's not to Herod. That would be, he's maybe Idumean, but I think he knows the Greek word for wrongful pride, which we call hubris. That would be hubristic.
Isn't in Rome you can't worship a living
That's right.
person? So this is just like
But this is not Rome.
a big flattering thing for Augustus because it's a blind king. So
Uh-huh.
I have no control over these people. They can do what they want.
That's right. Yeah, that's exactly right. There are a number of Augustia built in the East, not in any area that is part of Rome proper, just by these client kings. By the time of Augustus's successor, Tiberius, it's an acknowledged idea in the East to build temples to Roman emperors, and in fact, cities vie for permission to do so. There's this hilarious account in the Roman historian Livy of a bunch of cities from modern-day Turkey, the Roman province of Asia, including the town, it wasn't really even a city then, of Troy, who all came to the Roman Senate with ambassadors asking for permission to be able to build a temple in honor of Tiberius. And only one would be given permission to do so, and it was this great thing. But in the time of Augustus, yeah, Herod does this on his own.
I thought that Augustus gave permission for the other cities to build temples to him as long as it was to Augustus and Roma.
Well, this is not to Augustus and Roma. This is to Augustus. And we don't have record, per se, of Augustus giving permission to, there's no indication that this was that overt in this time. No historian talks about that. It's not until Tiberius that kind of thing goes on. Which is not to say that Herod could have possibly done this without knowing that this would be all right. So this enormous temple is built, smack in the middle. Now, this that you're looking at here, you might think that this is the temple, but it's not. This is the temple, right here. This little box, which you see here. I was really lucky to get here a few years ago before it became a completely insane idea to go here. It was just only slightly insane when I went and took some pictures, which is great because if you don't see pictures with people in them, you just cannot appreciate how big this thing is. It's huge. So it has these monumental front steps and this big colonnade across the top, and I have measurements which I put into the handy-dandy metric conversion chart on Safari to find out how big this was in feet. So the temple itself is 24 by 35 meters, which is 78 by 114 feet. There were colonnades on 3 sides and then front columns supporting the roof with these monumental steps just in the front coming down. And the plan of this, therefore, is a Roman temple, not a Greek temple. Greek temple is low to the ground, has columns all the way around. There's you can walk up into the peristyle and walk all the way around it. A Roman temple is very different. A Roman temple is up on a high podium. There are steps at the front, and there is a deep porch and entry that you walk through. The columns that go around the sides, like these columns, are hugged close to the wall. You can't just go ambling about in between to take a walk around in the ambulatory. So the Augusteum, the Temple of Augustus that's built here at Samaria, is built precisely on the model of a Roman temple such as this one, which is the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitol line in Rome, the very temple through whose doors and down whose steps Herod himself walked, flanked by just 12 short years earlier, Octavian and Mark Antony. But the temple is just the smallest piece of a large complex. The complex has a huge forecourt, enormous forecourt in front of it, which is almost the size of a football field. It's 72 by 83 meters, which is 236 by 272 feet. So absolutely enormous. Now, actually, there's not enough flat space to build a forecourt that large in front of the temple, because the temple is oriented not the way that the Israelite citadel was oriented. It's oriented 90 degrees to that. So in order for there to be enough flat space to have this huge football field-sized forecourt, which itself was surrounded by multiple colonnades, here's the temple, here's the topography. The forecourt was supported by an enormous construction project of vaulted arcades that created an artificial terrace on which the forecourt rested. And this was built in native construction techniques using ashlar blocks, ashlar masonry. So the plan and the style is Roman, but the construction techniques are native here. Now, that sort of construction is known from other large temple complexes in the East. Herod didn't have to go to Rome to learn this. Herod's perambulating about in the Eastern Mediterranean. And recall, for example, that Herod goes when Antony is up in Nicomedia in Bithynia. Herod hightails it up there to meet with him. And then he, takes a leisurely journey home, sails home. So he has, in his earlier days, he's been around the block. He's gone around. He's seen lots of these large, impressive sanctuaries and civic complexes at the great cities in the East. He knows what it means to think big architecturally. So this is the sanctuary of Asclepius on the island of Kos. And it is 3 terraces, all supported by these enormous vaulted substructures made from carved ashlar blocks. So we're standing on the first terrace looking up at the second, and there's the support, and then here's the third, and there's the temple of Asclepius is actually up there. You can only see the foundations now, so it doesn't stick up. But that would be very similar to approaching the temple at Samaria Sebaste. You would come up some steps, like here, and you would be on this huge colonnaded forecourt, and looming above you, high above you, would be the Temple of Augustus. The temple and the forecourt are part of a little fortress villa citadel for Herod. Herod builds himself a villa right next to the temple complex. Here's Herod's villa, and there's even a large sort of fancy dining room establishment, sort of separate banquet room, which is right here, immediately behind the temple. King and temple. Where have we seen that before? I don't hear you. Yes? And any place else that is a canonically Near Eastern imperial setup. So all of the Assyrian and the Babylonian palaces, all of the same thing. The ziggurat at Babylon was right next to the palace of the king. This is the Near Eastern tradition of king and god, here now transformed into king and political patron, who has been elevated by the underling to canonical status. And the villa that Herod builds is a peristyle courtyard villa. Here is the interior court. So here you see, for example, peristyle courtyard on the island of Delos. To give you a sense, we know that there was a mosaic here. The whole thing is very, very protected. Look at the size of these towers. And I mean, not just one tower. 1, 2, 3. I mean, he's safe. He's safe. No worries here. So whenever he chooses to come here, he's going to be all right. City 2. We know from the historian Josephus that on the site of Stratos Tower, the little old port, a very, very small casual port that had been established by Phoenician sailors, I don't know, probably in the Persian period, probably sometime in the Achaemenid Persian period, had been essentially abandoned for probably a couple of generations. By the time that the Hasmoneans had solidified their hold, their political hold on the interior of the country, many, not all, but many of the settlements, the smaller settlements along the coast, had become deserted. There was a chill in the air. It wasn't a comfortable place for people who were not Judean to live. And a lot of those people left. Places that were larger, like Dor or Jaffa or Ashkelon or Gaza, they stayed, although in some they had less people. I mean, we have less archaeological remains from the 1st century BCE. Stratos Tower, on the other hand, had been completely abandoned. It was just abandoned. That was a perfect spot. Now, why was there no large harbor here before? Why was there no large harbor any place along this part of the coast before? I'll tell you why. Because there's no good spot to have it. Harbors are natural for the most part, or they were up until this period. There had to be the already well-placed forms of natural openings and moles and formations that would make it simple to establish a large port. So Ptolemais was such a place. That's modern-day Akko. It's still a harbor. It was a place that was refounded under the Ptolemies, but it was a harbor even before that. Gaza was such a place, and those are the two real harbors. Otherwise, you have to go up to Tyre or continue down the coast to Alexandria. So there's the reason that Stratos Tower was not built up as a large port is because actually the contours of the harbor of Stratos Tower are right here. You're looking at an aerial view of Caesarea, and this is all silted in. But this was the harbor area of Stratos Tower, just this tiny little area right here. Herod makes a harbor from scratch. How do you make a harbor from scratch? You have to build what God did not provide. You have to build up from the seabed to the surface of the water and above seaworthy moles that will protect the inner harbor area from the waves of the sea. Herod received help from his new buddies, the Romans, with a new kind of construction technology that was essentially underwater concrete, a formulation that you could mix on land and, wait, I'll just go ahead for a second here, pour into formworks and then sink the formworks down under the water, and the concrete will cure. It will solidify and harden underwater and stay there. And because, this is sort of like, like when you, like a mafia killing. Like, except there's no body. You put it up on land and then you sink it down, and then it stays there. Stays right down there. It does not come back up again because it's all filled with concrete. And in this way, the outlines of the harbor, of Herod's harbor, this artificial harbor, were created. And you can see them here in aerial view. And how do we know? We know because of the underwater archaeologists that have worked at Caesarea for many, many years. And here they are vacuuming away sand from one of these formworks. And here's one of these formworks coming up with the balloon. And that's how we know that the whole thing gets built. So there was a small inner harbor, which was the old harbor of Stratos Tower, and then this huge outer harbor, which you can again see here in outline, marked with two lighthouses at the entrance. The harbor, which you see here in this beautiful watercolor drawing, courtesy of National Geographic, the harbor was dominated by a second temple to Augustus, this time to Augustus in Roma, which you see here in this drawing. Ooh, I think I'm going to go ahead for a second. I'll get back to that slide. And here is the platform for that temple, and it too is enormous. Ooh, I have a measurement for this. The platform is, again, the size of a football field. It's 90 meters east-west by 105 north-south. It's 98 by 114 yards. So that is substantial. And while it's easy to get banal about the word big, big clearly mattered to Herod. Big! I want it big! It's got to impress. So here's this enormous football field size platform. And on the platform, a lot of open space around the temple itself. Why? Well, it's more impressive that way. It's a lot more impressive if you can back up to get a good look. And that's what people could do. Here you see some students clearing out the sand in a trench that's in front of one of the foundation walls in front of the temple, right along there. The temple itself had these enormous, wide foundations, but only one row of columns around the perimeter. The foundations were wide enough for 2 rows of columns, but there was only 1 row of columns. I don't know if this was something of a cost-saving measure. Probably not at this point. But there's absolutely no evidence ever in anything that Herod does that cost was ever an issue. So it seems unlikely that it was an issue here. But the width would have given that much more shadowy depth cast off by the columns if you were looking at it from the outside. Instead of a huge forecourt in front of this temple, as there had been in front of the temple at Samaria, this temple, too, is raised on a massive podium, vaulted podium, and you see some of the vaults here. There are 12 of them altogether. But what was in front was the harbor itself. That was the forecourt. The inner harbor was the forecourt of the temple. There were steps. You can see them in this reconstruction drawing, so that you could ascend from the side. But you could not ascend directly from the front. There wasn't enough depth there for steps from the front. So you'd have seen this huge vaulted substructures, big podium, and then the temple. Now, why a big harbor? So there was the original idea that maybe it's commercial. You have a harbor, you get ships. You get ships, you get goods. You're connected to the Mediterranean. You can come, you can go. Look what happened to Herod when he was trying to flee and get to Rome fast. Where did he have to go? He had to go to Alexandria. He had to go all the way to Alexandria before he could be assured that he would find a ship that could take him to Rome. So you might think that a harbor is for, now I'm going to go all the way back to that slide that I had, for commerce. But I will point out to you an archaeological fact, which is that there's absolutely no evidence of trade goods in any significant way in this land during the time of Herod's life, or even for a little while after that. There's not even very much evidence for it in Herod's own living areas, in his own palaces. There's the occasional shipment of amphoras of wine or for fish sauce or various other things. Apples, he got an amphora full of apples from Italy. We know because we have the amphoras and they have notations on them. They have a little graffiti on them. So we know what they were for, what they stored. But they're 15 or 20. That's not commerce. That's a gift or a single-time purchase. I don't think that commerce was actually something that Herod was at all interested in. I mean, if it came, it came. He wasn't averse to it. He didn't have some sort of trade embargo. But a harbor in this period, in this land, a harbor was prestige. A harbor meant you were somebody. A harbor was like an international airport.
What happened in the last period when all the Greeks brought in all this stuff for the Philistines? They were bringing in Greek stuff so they didn't have to buy their own clay. They brought in
You mean like in the
steel. They brought in better glassware and everything.
Do you mean like in the Persian period where we have Greek tableware?
Right.
Like Greek cups and plates and people didn't make their own along the coast?
They got the Greek.
Right.
So there must have been Greek ships.
Yes.
Others coming in.
But yes, that's right. In the Persian period.
Yeah.
That's 500 years ago. 500 years ago. It is important periodically to remind yourself how much time goes by.
Did they have decent ports?
Well, they had small ships and they had small ports and they had trade then. They had plenty of trade then. But through the time of the Hellenistic period, first of all, we stopped getting imports from Greece. The potters in Athens no longer make pottery for export. People in the East no longer receive Athenian pottery. Now they're receiving pottery from places that are made in this area itself. So it's been a long time since that kind of small-scale, busy barter has been part of this world. which is not to say that there are not plenty of ships traveling around with goods. There were grain ships that went regularly from Alexandria to Italy in this period. But this is where they went. They went from here, they hugged the coast like this, and then up here, or they went this way and then this way. So we're over here.
I don't really understand the point. I mean, like, I get the having a big harbor is prestige, but like, what's a harbor with no boats in it?
Well, there would have been both. I mean, it's not that there wouldn't have been travel. I mean, there was, well, you know, we don't know. I mean, it's not like we have dockets, right? So we don't have specific evidence. You know, was it trade ships? Was it ships that went periodically, you know, up and down the coast, like taking people on visits? I mean, we know that there was a lot of marketing in this area. I mean, we have goods along the coast from other manufacturers that are along the coast. So we get, for example, pottery in this area that was made up here. And absolutely the fastest and easiest way to transport it would have been by boat. And we know that there was a lot of traffic that came from this area to this area. I mean, there was already traffic that came down here. So this was just another place that people could stop, rest, resupply, offload. What I'm saying is that we don't have systematic, wide-scale evidence that suddenly goods from this region appear in this region.
Like a little, like, highway stop place.
Yes.
Where you go and read a little bit about, seating people or something.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's yet another option. You know, it's like a rest stop, a new rest stop that gets built. So it used to be that the road sign said 200 sea miles before next rest stop, and now it says, oh, 100 sea miles before next rest stop. Now you can stop at Caesarea. Do what you want there. There are Romans here, not tons. I mean, most of the people here are the people who's always been here, but it's now a Roman province. You know, when a place becomes a Roman province, it doesn't mean that a whole bunch of Romans move in. You know, I mean, you got your legion, okay? Every province gets a legion. Every governor gets a legion. But there's not necessarily, I mean, in some of the larger cities, Antioch and Beirut and Byblos and, you know, some of the big cities, we find, you know, some goods from the Mediterranean at large, and even the occasional Italian amphora. But it's not, you know, this is an area that's been doing just fine, thank you very much, on its own for quite a few hundred years now. And it continues in that same way. It's just that there's a different person in charge. Think about it the way that it was in the Persian period. You know, when all of this becomes part of the Persian period, it's not like everything is swept over with Persian goods. In fact, we never saw any Persian goods, essentially, really, except for clay, and a couple metal achaemenid bowls. The imported goods that were Greek, as a matter of fact, in that period. Empire doesn't mean population change. It doesn't mean cultural change. It's just to whom you pay your taxes, really, you know, and who, if there's some huge outside threat like the Parthians, who will come to your aid. So it's money and defense. Those are imperial jobs and responsibilities. So what this map shows you are harbors. These are, and there are more than these, but these are all major harbors, ports, throughout the Mediterranean. And what the map does not really well convey is that, for the most part, each of these is the harbor, the port of one region, one province or political entity. So Bithynia, Thrace, Asia, Rhodes is its own island, Crete, there were 2 on Cyprus, Egypt, Cyrene, Sicily, Macedonia. If you are an independent or specific political unit, you need a face for the outside world. Otherwise, where do you go? It's not about it. What Herod realized from all of the time that he'd spent moving around is that for the people here, Judea might be a reasonable appellation, might be a reasonable demarcation. For everybody out here, Judea is nothing. It's how you get there. Where do you stop? Where do you go? Do you have to take a feeder airline, or can you go straight there? Is it a hub? By establishing a port, he gives Judea a hub. He names it after Augustus Caesar, Caesarea. There's more than one Caesarea, so we know it as Caesarea Maritima. That means the seaside Caesarea. Caesarea Maritima got a few more. It wasn't just a harbor, and it wasn't just a temple. It was a city, like Samaria. Lots of people are moved to here. It's a very, very good and safe place to make a new city. All of these disenfranchised non-Judeans along the coast have been waiting for the culture bug to come their way, for the goods and the progress that means Roman rule. Where is it? These backward, non-luxury loving folks in the interior are bringing us down. So Herod delivers. First of all, a real Roman city has efficient utilities, running water. A 12.5-mile long aqueduct, which you can see here in aerial view and here in detail, brought water from the mountains of Carmel. 6.5 miles above ground, the aqueduct ran, 6 miles tunneled until a natural water source in the Carmel Mountains 12 miles north brought running water. Here the beach has eroded away the rest of the aqueduct, but it came all the way into the city. Here's the temple platform. Here's the outer harbor. So the edge of the Roman city, I mean the wall of it is about there, the northern wall. Then along the south, so here's the harbor, there's the aqueduct, here's the temple platform. And one of the things that you can notice right away about the temple platform and the temple is that it's oriented differently than the rest of the city. You can see that the platform and the temple are oriented to the harbor. They are their own zone. That is what you might call the international zone. Then there's the rest of the city, and the interior and the part along the coast, the sort of the waterfront acreage, the nicest part, was turned over to one integrated complex, 2 entertainment buildings and a palace, which we'll get to, but almost certainly not today. The palace is down here, but one of the entertainment buildings is here, and you're standing in, and it is, well, we don't really know what to call it. The historian Josephus says that Herod builds an amphitheater at Caesarea. Well, Herod built this, and no archaeologist or architectural historian has ever considered a building in this shape to be an amphitheater. An amphitheater is like the Colosseum in Rome, you know, the thing that looks like 2 theaters that have been put together. That's what it means, actually, amphitheater. So a building with this shape is usually called a circus. So this is one of this was actually the cause of a hilarious, long, extended, hissy-fit fight between archaeologists because there were the ones who said, well, Josephus says it's an amphitheater. And then there were the ones that say, it doesn't really matter what Josephus says because this doesn't look like an amphitheater, so it can't be an amphitheater. And then for a while, everybody was like, well, this can't be the one that Herod built because it doesn't look like an amphitheater. But archaeology has shown that, in fact, Herod built this. So anyway, people have come up with various names for it. It doesn't really matter what you call it. You could do all sorts of stuff in it. You could have horse races. You could have foot races. It's very large. It is 290 yards long. That's 3 football fields. That's a good race. I don't have any idea what a track, the size of a track is, but I don't think it's 3 football fields, right? Yeah. So this is very sizable, like everything that Herod builds. And then there is a theater, just a regular Roman theater, a Roman theater, such as this, for example, which Herod certainly would have seen when he was in Rome, a theater that was built by the patron of his dad, Pompey. This was the first permanent stone theater in Rome, and it was a great sensation. What's the difference between a Roman theater and a Greek theater? A Greek theater is built in a place that's conducive to building a theater naturally, so a great big hillside. A Roman theater is built wherever a Roman wants to build it. If it's built up, you have flat land, no problem. We'll just build it up. So a Roman theater has outside walls that stand straight up. So here you're looking at the inside, and a vaulted substructure around, such as this here, built again with ashlar masonry, like most of these constructions of Herod. Now, what about Jerusalem? What should you do in Jerusalem? Already a city, had been on the other side, had been on the side of Aristobulus, and then on the side of Aristobulus' son, Antigonus. Nobody here likes Herod. Nobody here trusts Herod. But this is a power base. Now for Herod, the Council of Elders is here, the high priest is here. All right, you might reconstitute Samaria, the former capital of the bad kingdom, the kingdom of Israel. You might turn that into a Roman city. Go ahead. This is different. This is 1,000 years old, and it has been rebuilt as a Jewish city. The temple is here, just like in the old days. Solomon's temple. Cyrus allowed the Jews to return here. This is the real deal. And Herod does not mess around. The city, which has already grown considerably, and it now extends over the area of the Western Hill, Herod firmly shores up the defenses that the Hasmoneans had already built. You're here looking at the citadel towards the Temple Mount. Here's the Western Hill. So this area is, essentially this area here on this aerial view. Here you're looking north. Here you're looking east, that way. So this set of structures with these towers here, are Herodian. And they are built linking up fragments of the earlier Hasmonean fortifications. Immediately south of this newly fortified spot, this is a strongly fortified spot because this is a weak point in the defenses of Jerusalem. The north and the west are weak points. It's a little bit easier to get up and into the city right here. So you need more massive fortifications. That's why repeatedly in the time of the First Temple period, in the time of the Hasmoneans, and now in the time of Herod, rulers have turned their attention to fortifying this spot. Immediately south of it, south of this extremely well-fortified spot, Herod built himself one of his palaces. Happily, we have none of it. So I can't even pretend to try to talk to you about it. You don't even have any reading about it because it's gone. It's been completely, was destroyed eventually by the Romans and then built over, and there's no trace of it ever been found. But we know it was south of the citadel, so in this area right down here. But the big project, the main project, is a new temple and a new platform to support the new temple, because the old temple is now pretty old. That second temple was dedicated in the year 515 BCE. 500 years ago. It's showing its age. It's time. So here, Herod builds this huge, huge new construction. The first thing he does is make the area upon which the temple stood larger. He has to make it bigger because, you know, big is like his middle name. We know that he extends the platform, what I'm going to start calling the Temple Mount, quite a bit to the south, because along the wall on the east, you're standing essentially on the Mount of Olives, facing west. So this is the eastern wall of the Temple Mount, and you can see this line right here, this straight line. This is called the seam, S-E-A-M. Up to this point, from here north, is one kind of masonry, and from here south is another kind of masonry. And this masonry is Herodian. It's the masonry that is characterized by beautifully smoothed ashlar blocks. Now, usually, when you make an ashlar block, all four surfaces, the surfaces upon next to which other blocks rest, they all need to be smooth so that other blocks can sit flush with them. How do you tell, however, when you're building that you've put your block directly on the block that's below it? You need your wall, you know, not to go in or for the stones to go out a little. They need to be completely vertical. Well, the way now and the way then to tell if your stones were straight is to drop a plumb line. I mean, essentially a string with a weight on the bottom, and you drop it down along the wall, and if the line can hang completely straight and the distance between the string and the stones is the same, then your wall is straight. But if the surface of the stone is sticking out, you can't drop a plumb line because the surface of the stone is going to get in the way. Now, the whole surface of the stone doesn't need to be smoothed off because that's a lot of extra work. But the edges need to be smoothed off so that there's a place where you can drop the line. So usually, you see the edges, you can see that there's this sort of sticky-outy middle face on these stones. And it's sort of roughly finished off because there's no reason to finish it off in a fancy way. All you need is the edge so that you can drop your line straight down. Herodian building stones have that central part that sticks out, but it's all smoothed back for one reason only, because it looks cool. Just imagine the amount of extra work here. This is architectural finesse for its own sake. Some of these stones are absolutely enormous. Look at this one. Someplace here I've got a measurement. Yeah, that's the longest stone visible in the Temple Mount. It's 42 feet long, 11 feet high, and 14 feet deep. It's more like a foundation block, but it's a cut stone. And it weighed about 600 tons. So, all right, the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount has 2 buildings on it, and only 2. Oh, the size of the Temple Mount is about 3 football fields. So it's pretty big. 3 football fields, a lot of empty space. Same reason that there was a lot of empty space on the temple platform at Caesarea, because it's a lot more impressive that way. 2 buildings only. The temple, surrounded by a protective wall and a series of courtyards that you would have to go through, but essentially one structure. and one building that went the entire width of the southern end of the Temple Mount, a long stoa. The stoa is just a colonnaded hall. This is a colonnaded hall, and it was called the Royal Stoa, the King's Stoa. And here you see what that would have been like inside. It was huge, had an apsidal end, a high central hall. There were lots of meetings and stuff inside here. This would be the venue for those of you who know your New Testament and want to imagine the place where Jesus overturns the tables of the money changers. It's here. There would have been vendors selling pigeons or doves for sacrifice, people changing money, other sorts of knickknacks that you could buy. All of that would have been housed inside here, inside the Royal Stoa. How did you access the Temple Mount? The main entrance was from the south, so that you would come up on the side that the Royal Stoa was on. There were a huge staircase, and you see it here in aerial view, 200 feet long. This is a tower from the Umayyad period, so you have to ignore that. 200 feet long, and you can see in this view that the steps are a very funny arrangement. There's a little step and then a wider step, a little step and then a wider step. So you can step up onto the wider step, but then you can't step directly onto the next step because it's a little bit too wide. Well, that's weird. That's actually uncomfortable. That slows you up. You can't just run up the steps. Why? Many years ago, I went to a lecture about Japanese tea ceremonies. And in Japanese tea ceremonies, real traditional ones that take place at tea houses that are out in open areas, you access the pagoda where you're going to have the tea by a series of sort of flagstones. Sometimes they cross over streams, and it's very carefully arranged. And the flagstones are arranged in such a way that you cannot just walk on them easily. It's not like some easily walkable path. You have to look. You have to stop. You have to think about it. You have to carefully wend your way. It forces you to pay attention to the act of entering. And it's on purpose. And that's what's going on here. It forces you to stop and attend to entering the area. When you get up to the top, there's a door. Here is the original arch of the door. This, for all of you who have been doing your reading, is Jody Magnus about 25 years ago when we were students together in Jerusalem. And we were taking a walk and taking pictures. And I said, Jody, stand here. This is going to be a great shot. You're going to have a good scale for the size of this doorway. So there she is. All right, so you would walk up these giant steps, and then there would be, there was a passageway at the top of the steps that actually led you below the area of the Royal Stoa and then up directly onto the Temple Mount. If you wanted to enter the Royal Stoa, you did that from a stairway that's on the west side of the wall, which we haven't looked at yet. But here, you would go through this sort of tunnel concourse and come up on to the Temple Mount itself.
So you can actually access it from the Stoa right to the temple?
Yes, you can. You can. It was just open all along these sides. It was totally open. You could just walk right through once you were up there. But if you wanted to walk directly into the Stoa, you had to go from this entrance. Well, actually, there are many, many ways to get onto the Temple Mount. There are two entrances on this side. There are two entrances on this side. There's one on this side. So there's plenty of ways to get there, and there's plenty of choices. You can go directly into the Royal Stoa here. You can go directly in the Royal Stoa from this side. You can go straight onto the Temple Mount from two different ways on the south side, and also from a bridge over here in the west. So actually there are many options. I think specific, on purpose. I mean, obviously on purpose. The ceiling of these passageways were beautifully decorated with stone carvings, and here you see fragments of some that have been found. Remember this pattern, because you're going to see it next week. All right. On the south side, here's in this nice reconstruction drawing, you can see the south side. This was the main public access. And because it was the main public access to the temple, there's a lot of installations for people to get themselves all ready to enter the precinct, including mikvaot, small ones, deep ones, and weird ones. This is a weird one. It's just like, I don't know, four-sided one. It's unique. And they've been found in this area here to the south of the Temple Mount. If you wanted to enter just directly into the Royal Stoa and you were down here in the valley that goes along the western side, you could come up these big stairs and enter on top of this arcaded support that supported these stairways. And this was originally the only evidence that we had for it. It's that piece of the springing of the arch right there. And here you can see a closer reconstruction of it. And down at the bottom were shops. So this is the actual Herodian street level, and these are Herodian shops. Even the doorways of the shops, the stones are finished in this beautiful, smooth as glass Herodian masonry. Just gorgeous. Okay, that is it for today. There is, I'm sorry to tell you, and I can't remember if I told you this or not, no class on Tuesday. Something came up and I have to go to Boston. I apologize. We were supposed to have class, but now we aren't. So you have another week before class. And then that's it. I'm not going anywhere else. I'm staying here until the end of the semester, I swear to God. So next Thursday. See you then.